The scent was an offense, a violation. It was the smell of fire, crude and uncontrolled, layered over the sacred aroma of a fresh kill. But not just any kill. Kira's nostrils flared, drawing in the complex bouquet of scorched flesh, vaporized blood, and the unmistakable, acrid tang of a graalmaw. Her slitted pupils, emerald green against black fur, narrowed to slivers as she moved through the undergrowth of xylos. Not even the damp, loamy perfume of the jungle floor or the sweet rot of fallen moon blossoms could mask the sacrilege. She moved with a silence that was a birthright of her people, the Cathar. Each pawfall was a deliberate, weight-tested placement on moss and root, her powerful muscles coiling and uncoiling beneath a sleek coat of obsidian fur. The twin tails she possessed, a mark of a pure-blooded hunter, swished in silent agitation, their tips just brushing the fronds of giant, phosphorescent ferns. A graalmaw. The beast was a walking fortress of chitinous plates and primal fury, a creature that even the most seasoned Cathar hunting parties approached with reverence and extreme caution. To find one slain and being cooked by a lone hunter was unthinkable. Through a screen of bloodleaf vines she saw it, the trespasser. It was a creature unlike any she had ever seen. Bipedal, yes, but soft-skinned and oddly proportioned. It was mostly hairless, save for a dark thatch on its head, and its hide was a pale, vulnerable pinkish tan. An off-worlder. The realization sent a fresh spike of fury through her. This jungle, this world, was hers. It was the sacred hunting ground of the Cathar. This soft thing had no right to be here, no right to breathe this air, and certainly no right to desecrate a totem predator like the graalmaw. The creature was crouched by a fire pit, its back to her. It used a sharpened stick to turn chunks of the gray, steaming meat over the flames. Its movements were economical, efficient. It had taken the beast down cleanly. Kira could see the single, massive puncture wound behind the graalmaw's primary ocular cluster, a weak point known only to the most skilled hunters. This soft thing was not just lucky. It was dangerous. Her claws, long and curved as scythes, slid from their sheaths with a faint snick. Her muscles tensed for the killing leap. She would be on him in 2 heartbeats. A silent, swift execution for his trespass. Her target was just 30 paces away, completely unaware, his focus on his meal. She gathered herself, the predator's hum vibrating deep in her chest. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The voice was calm, low, and spoken in the guttural trade tongue used by galactic spacers. It sent a jolt through Kira's nervous system, stalling her lunge mid-thought. The creature hadn't turned. He hadn't even paused in his task of tending the fire. How could it have known? Her approach had been flawless, masked by the rustle of the canopy breeze and the hiss of the fire. Her scent was downwind. It was impossible. Confusion warred with her hunter's instinct. This was prey. Prey did not dictate terms. It did not sense the unseen hunter. She took a half step to the side, shifting her angle, trying to understand this anomaly. Her weight shifted onto her left forepaw. Snap. The sound was wood and vine and something else, something sharp. A searing pain shot up her leg, and the ground gave way beneath her. She let out an involuntary, enraged hiss as a lattice of cleverly woven vines, previously invisible beneath a dusting of leaves and soil, ensnared her leg. A weighted sapling, bent to an impossible tension, whipped upwards. Kira was yanked off her feet, hoisted into the air with brutal efficiency, her injured leg tangled in a noose of fibrous cord that bit deep into her flesh. She dangled upside down, 10 feet above the jungle floor, disoriented and incandescent with fury and humiliation. A hunter of the Cathar, caught in a primitive snare a kit could have spotted. Only now did the soft-skinned creature stand and turn. He moved with a languid grace that belied the trap's sudden violence. He was taller than she'd thought, lean but with a corded strength visible in his arms and shoulders. He held the cooking stick like a casual spear. His face was angular, his eyes a strange, pale shade of gray, and they regarded her not with triumph or fear, but with a weary, analytical calm. "See," he said, his voice still even. "I told you." He took a bite of the cooked graalmaw meat from the end of his stick, chewing thoughtfully as he studied her. The audacity of it stole her breath. She thrashed against the snare, a storm of black fur and snarling fury, but her struggles only tightened the knot around her throbbing leg. Blood, warm and sticky, began to seep through her fur. "The more you fight, the deeper it cuts," the human said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. It's a constrictor knot, designed for things with claws and teeth that don't like being caught. Kira ceased her struggles, her breath coming in ragged pants. The pain was a hot, insistent pulse. Her pride was a shredded ruin. She glared at him, pouring all her hatred and frustration into the look. "You will die for this, off-worlder." Her voice was a low growl, each word a promise of violence. He sighed, a sound of profound tiredness. "Probably, but not today. And not by you, it seems." He gestured with his stick toward her trapped leg. "That's a creche vine, strong, flexible, and the thorns are coated in a mild neurotoxin. In about an hour, your whole leg will go numb. In 2, you won't be able to feel your hips. You'll be great bait for whatever comes scavenging." He was right. She could already feel a strange, tingling sensation spreading from the wound. Fear, cold and unwelcome, began to seep past the edges of her rage. This human was not just a killer. He was a trapper, a student of the jungle. He knew its tools. "What do you want?" she snarled. "For now. To finish my dinner," he said, turning back to the fire. He sat down, calmly retrieving another piece of meat. "We can talk after, or not. Your choice. But you're kind of hanging over my dining area, and the dripping blood is ruining the ambience." For a long minute, the only sounds were the crackle of the fire and Kira's strained breathing. She watched him eat, this impossible creature who had hunted a Graalmaw, sensed an ambush he couldn't have seen, and trapped a Cathar master hunter. He was an enigma, a walking contradiction of vulnerability and lethal competence. Her leg throbbed, the poison a creeping chill against the heat of her anger. For the first time since she was a kid, Kira felt a sliver of something she had almost forgotten: uncertainty. And it was far more terrifying than any trap. Marcus finished his meal, deliberately, methodically. He scraped the bones clean and tossed them into the dense foliage, where they were instantly swarmed by thumb-sized scavenger beetles. He watched Kira hang there, her initial fury having subsided into a tense, simmering stillness. Her emerald eyes tracked his every move, promising retribution. The blood drip from her leg had slowed to a sluggish crawl. "All right," he said, standing and wiping his hands on his canvas trousers. "Let's talk options. Option 1, I leave you here. The shriek bats will be out soon, and they love dangling things. They're not dangerous, but their calls will attract things that are. You'll be a meal on a rope by sunrise." Kira's tufted ears flattened against her skull. She remained silent, her pride warring with the cold logic of his words. "Option 2, he continued, pacing slowly beneath her. "I cut you down, you try to kill me. Maybe you succeed, but you're injured and your leg is half poisoned. Even if you win, you'll have a hard time getting back to wherever you came from. You'll be slow, weak, and this jungle eats the slow and the weak." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And for the record, I don't think you'd succeed. I'm a better fighter than I look." His confidence was galling. "You are soft-fleshed prey," she hissed. "Arrogant, and you're a fur-covered predator hanging upside down from my trap," he countered without malice. "Looks like we're both full of surprises." He stopped pacing and looked up at her, his gray eyes unreadable. "Which brings us to option 3. I cut you down and you don't try to kill me. I can treat that wound. I know the antidote for creche vine poison. It's the sap from a gray heart mushroom. There's a whole cluster of them about 100 paces from here." Her eyes widened slightly. He knew the jungle's remedies. He wasn't just surviving, he was living here learning. "Why?" she growled, the single word heavy with suspicion. "What do you want from me?" "A deal," Marcus said simply. "I help you, I get you home. In exchange, you get me off this planet. Your people must have a ship or a way to call one. I want safe passage to the nearest civilized starport. That's it. No tricks, no traps. Passage off-world." Her clan's settlement was a month's hard trek from here, nestled in the sheltered caldera of the sleeping giant mountains. They had a single long-range shuttle, a relic used only for emergencies or vital trade. The elders would never agree to ferry an off-worlder. They were xenophobic, distrustful of all who did not share their blood or their reverence for the hunt. To bring this human, there would be to invite scorn, perhaps even exile. But the alternative, he was right. The poison was working its way through her system. The throbbing in her leg was giving way to a dull, heavy numbness. Soon, she would be helpless. "Your word is worthless," she said, testing him. "You are without honor." "My word is all I have left," he replied, his tone turning colder. I've been stranded on this glorified death trap for 2 standard years. I've learned 2 things. How to stay alive and how to keep a promise, because breaking one out here gets you dead. So, you can trust my word, or you can trust the things that crawl in the dark. What's it going to be? She stared down at him, at this strange, resilient creature. He was offering her life, but at a cost to her way of life. Yet, what choice did she have? The instinct to survive was the most fundamental law of the jungle, overriding pride, overriding even tradition. "Cut me down," she said, the words tasting like ash. "And I will give you my word. I will take you to my people. I cannot promise what they will do, but I will ask for your safe passage." It was the best she could offer, an honest Cathar bargain. Marcus nodded once as if he had expected this. Good enough? He retrieved a long, wicked-looking knife from a sheath on his belt. The blade was fashioned from the sharpened mandible of some massive insectoid. He walked to the base of the bent sapling, the source of the trap's tension. With a single, powerful swing, he hacked through the anchor vine. The release of tension was instantaneous and violent. Kira plummeted to the ground, landing in a heap with a strangled cry of pain as her injured leg twisted beneath her. The world swam in a nauseous, pain-filled haze. Before she could even attempt to rise, Marcus was there. He knelt beside her, not with aggression but with a detached sort of efficiency. "Don't move," he ordered, his voice firm. He worked quickly at the knot around her ankle. His fingers were surprisingly nimble, probing and loosening the tight cords. She could feel the warmth of his hands through her fur, a strange and unsettling sensation. Her hunter's mind screamed at her to rip his throat out for being so close, so careless. But her body was a leaden weight, and the leg was a block of numb meat attached to her hip. She could do nothing but lie there, helpless, as the strange off-worlder disarmed the trap that had snared her. He finally pulled the vine free. The thorns had left a ring of angry, bleeding punctures around her ankle. The skin was already swelling and discolored. "Stay here," he said, then disappeared into the jungle. He returned moments later holding a mottled gray mushroom, its cap oozing a thick, milky sap. He knelt again and without ceremony squeezed the sap directly into the wounds. The effect was immediate. A ferocious, cleansing fire erupted in her leg, 10 times worse than the initial pain of the trap. She arched her back and let out a choked gasp, her claws digging furrows in the soft earth. The fire burned away the numbness, chasing the poison from her veins. It was excruciating, but it was the feeling of life returning. "It'll hurt for a while," Marcus said, observing his handiwork. "But the paralysis will stop. You'll be able to walk on it by morning, probably with a limp." He tore a strip of cloth from the bottom of his shirt and began to wrap her ankle, his movements gentle but firm. Kira watched him through slitted eyes, her breathing ragged. This human was a paradox. He trapped her, then tended to her. He spoke of death, then offered a cure. He was prey who acted like a predator, a soft thing with a will of iron. As he tied off the makeshift bandage, his fingers brushed against her fur, and a strange shiver, entirely unrelated to the pain or the poison, coursed through her. Their journey had begun, not with a step, but with a bargain struck in pain and necessity, under the watchful, alien sky of Xylos. And for the first time, Kira suspected the hunt she was on was not for any beast, but for an understanding of the impossible man now walking beside her. The first days of their journey were a silent trial of wills. Kira, driven by a stubborn pride, refused to show the extent of her injury. She set a punishing pace, moving through the dense jungle with a limp she tried desperately to conceal. The pain was a constant, grinding presence, but the humiliation of being seen as weak in front of the human was a sharper torment. Marcus, for his part, seemed to notice but said nothing. He simply adjusted his own pace to match hers, walking a few steps behind and to her side, his gray eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. His awareness continued to unnervant her. He saw things she, with her superior Cathar senses, overlooked. Once, he put a hand on her shoulder to stop her, pointing to a nearly invisible tracery of silver thread stretched between 2 trees at throat level. A garrote spider's web. Its neurotoxic silk could paralyze a creature her size in seconds. Kira's fur bristled. She would have walked right into it, her mind focused on the pain in her leg and her resentment of her companion. He had saved her life again, without a word of triumph. He simply pointed it out, and they found a way around. Another time, as she bent to drink from a crystal-clear stream, he quietly said, "I'd filter that." He produced a small, battered metal canteen with a filtration unit built into the lid. The water itself is pure, but it's full of microlarvae. They'll burrow into your gut lining. It's a bad way to go. He filled his canteen and offered it to her. She stared at it for a long moment before accepting, her thirst overriding her pride. The water was clean, tasteless. She had been on this world her entire life and had never known of that danger. The elders taught them which big things would eat you, not which small things would kill you from within. Their campfires were tense, quiet affairs. Marcus would prepare their food, smoked graalmaw meat, and whatever edible tubers or fruits he identified and gathered during the day. He had a small, battered kit containing a fire starter, a water purifier, and a few other survival essentials he must have salvaged from his crash. He offered her a share of the food each night, and she accepted, knowing she couldn't hunt effectively with her injury. The silence between them was thick, broken only by the chirps, clicks, and distant roars of the Xylan night. "How did you know?" she finally asked one evening, the words tearing from her throat against her will. They sat on opposite sides of a small, crackling fire, the flames casting dancing shadows on his angular face. Marcus looked up from sharpening his insect mandible knife on a smooth river stone. "Know what? That I was there," she clarified, her voice a low growl. "Before your trap in the clearing, you spoke to me before you saw me." He set the knife down and leaned back against a mossy log. "You're not as silent as you think you are," he said. "You're good, better than anything else I've ever encountered on this planet, but you have a scent, all living things do, and you have a weight, you displace the air. You change the way the sounds of the jungle echo. I've spent 2 years learning to listen to the baseline rhythm of this place. You were a disruption in that rhythm. I felt you before I could see or hear you." Kira processed this. The Cathar hunted with their eyes, their ears, their noses. They were masters of the physical senses. This human spoke of something else, a kind of total environmental immersion that was almost a sixth sense. He didn't just live in the jungle. He was part of its nervous system. "My ship was a long-range survey vessel," he offered, unprompted. "The Stardust Drifter." We were charting unmapped systems. A gravitic shear caught us on the edge of this system, tore us apart. I was the only one who made it to an escape pod. He stared into the fire, his eyes distant. "The pod's emergency beacon was damaged in the crash. Its supplies lasted me a month. The rest I had to learn." "How did you learn?" she asked, genuinely curious now. "This world does not teach, it kills." "The ship's database survived, partially," he explained. "Before the power cells completely died, I downloaded every scrap of xenobotanical and xenozoological survey data we had on Xylos. It wasn't much, just flyby scans. But it gave me a starting point. Which plants were protein-rich, which were poison, which atmospheric spores would liquefy my lungs. The rest, the graalmaw's weak spot, the garrote spiders, the microlarva, that was trial and error. A lot of error. I watched. I learned. And I got lucky." A flicker of respect ignited within her. He was not merely a survivor. He was a scholar of death. He had taken fragmented data and through sheer intellect and will had mastered an environment that had culled his entire crew. He was not prey. He was something else entirely, something for which her Cathar upbringing had no category. Their journey continued. Her leg healed, the limp fading to a slight stiffness. She began to take the lead again, her natural hunting instincts guiding them along the swiftest and safest paths. But now, she found herself listening differently. She started to notice the subtle shifts in the jungle's rhythm that Marcus had spoken of. The sudden silence of the canopy insects that signaled an approaching ground predator. The change in air pressure before a flash storm. He was teaching her without ever saying a word. The river was their first true test as a team. The Serpent's Coil, a wide, churning expanse of brown water known to be infested with armored, eel-like predators. There was no bridge, and the nearest shallow crossing was a week's detour. "We build a raft," Marcus stated, eyeing the turbulent water. "A raft will be torn apart," Kira countered. "The river serpents will shred the vines and logs. We must wait for the currents to calm." "That could be days," he argued. "Look at the sky. The rainy season is coming. This river will double in size. It's now or not for a month." He pointed upstream. See that overhang with the thick-trunked ironwood trees? We don't build a raft. We build a battering ram. His plan was audacious. They spent the better part of a day felling a massive ironwood tree, its wood so dense it barely floated. Using his knife and her claws, they sharpened one end to a crude point. They lashed two smaller, more buoyant logs to its sides for stability, using the same creche vine that had once ensnared her. The serpents attack from below, he explained as they worked, sweat beading on his brow. They strike at things on the surface. But if we're mostly submerged and the main body of our vessel is harder than their teeth, they're more likely to ignore us. Pushing the heavy contraption into the water was a monumental effort. They guided it into the main current, both of them clinging to the back, half submerged in the cold, murky water. The current seized them immediately, pulling them into the raging channel. It didn't take long. The first serpent struck with the force of a battering ram, its armored head slamming into the side of the ironwood log. The impact nearly threw Kira into the water. The creature was a nightmare of scales and teeth, 20 feet long, its jaws gaping. But Marcus had been right. Its teeth scraped uselessly against the impossibly hard wood. It thrashed in frustration and then dove away. Another came, and then a third. The water churned around them. One of the smaller stabilizing logs was ripped away. Their crude vessel listed dangerously. A serpent's serrated tail whipped over the log, catching Kira across the back. The blow was glancing, but it knocked the air from her lungs and sent her sliding into the churning water. The cold was a shock, the current a powerful, dragging hand. She fought her way to the surface, gasping for air just as the serpent turned for another pass, its maw wide. Before she could react, a hand clamped down on her shoulder scruff, strong and unyielding. Marcus, holding onto the log with one hand, had leaned far out over the water and grabbed her. He hauled with a desperate grunt, his muscles straining, pulling her from the direct path of the attacking predator. He dragged her back onto the relative safety of the log, their bodies pressed together, the river raging around them. "Got you?" he panted, his face inches from hers. She stared at him, water streaming from her fur, her heart hammering against her ribs. In his eyes she saw no calculation, no thought of their bargain. She saw only the raw, instinctual drive to protect an ally. In that moment, surrounded by turbulent water and ravenous beasts, the last of her animosity was washed away, replaced by a grudging, powerful respect. He had saved her, she had trusted him, and they had survived. When they finally crashed onto the opposite bank, bruised, exhausted, and shivering, they collapsed onto the muddy shore. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The journey was far from over, but something fundamental had shifted between them. They were no longer a hunter and her captive, or two rivals in a forced alliance. They were partners. And as Kira looked at the human lying beside her, his chest rising and falling in exhaustion, she felt a new, unfamiliar warmth spread through her chest. A feeling as strange and powerful as the Xylan jungle itself. The night after the river crossing marked a turning point. They found shelter in a shallow cave carved from the cliffside by centuries of wind and water, the entrance veiled by a curtain of hanging moss. Marcus managed to start a fire just inside the cave's mouth, its warmth a welcome comfort against the damp chill that had settled deep in their bones. The adrenaline of their survival had faded, leaving behind a profound weariness and the dull ache of their bruises. Kira sat tending to the long, shallow gash the river serpent's tail had left across her back. It wasn't deep, but it stung fiercely. Marcus approached her quietly, holding a small, flat leaf that he'd smeared with a green paste. "Here," he said, his voice soft. "It's called soothe leaf. The pulp has antiseptic and pain-dulling properties." She hesitated for a moment, then turned, granting him access to her back. It was an act of immense trust. To expose one's back to another was a sign of vulnerability a Cathar rarely showed. Marcus seemed to understand this. His touch was clinical and respectful as he gently applied the cool paste to the wound. His fingers were calloused but careful, and where they brushed her fur, a strange electricity sparked across her skin. "You're fast," she said, the words coming out quieter than she intended. "When you pulled me from the water." "You're heavy," he countered with a faint smile in his voice. "Solid muscle under all that fur. I'm going to feel that in my shoulder for a week." She let out a soft sound, a low rumble in her chest that was almost a purr. "A small price to pay for your life, If I had been swept away, you would not have survived a week in the bloodwood forest ahead of us. So I saved you to save myself. Is that what you think? He asked, his hands stilling for a moment. It is logical, she stated, though she no longer believed it. Maybe, he said, resuming his work, or maybe I'm just not the kind of person who lets his partner get eaten if he can help it. The word hung in the air between them. Partner, it was more than ally, more than companion. It implied a shared fate, a bond forged in mutual reliance. He finished dressing the wound and moved back to his side of the fire. The silence that fell was different now. It was no longer a tense, watchful quiet, but a comfortable one, filled with unspoken understanding. "Tell me about your people, Kira," Marcus said, breaking the silence. He had never used her name before. Hearing it from his lips was strangely intimate. "We are the Cathar," she began, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "We live for the hunt. It is our religion, our culture, our purpose. To be a great hunter is to be a great Cathar. We honor our prey by using every part of it, by making its death meaningful. It is why what you did to the Graalmaw was such an offense." "I was hungry," he said simply. "Survival doesn't leave much room for ceremony." "For you, perhaps," she conceded. "For us, the ceremony is a part of survival. It reminds us of our place in the great cycle. We are not masters of this world. We are a part of it. The Graalmaw is a totem predator. Its strength is a testament to the power of Xylos. To hunt one is a sacred rite, undertaken by a full party with weeks of ritual and preparation. You did it alone for food. It was disrespectful. I respect that it tried to kill me 3 times before I managed to put a spear through its eye," Marcus said dryly. "I respect its hide is tough enough to turn a knife, and its claws can tear through rock. My respect is practical. It's born from knowing exactly how dangerous something is." Kira turned this over in her mind. A different kind of honor, a pragmatist's reverence. "And what of your people, Marcus? Do they have no honor? No rituals?" A shadow passed over his face. "We have a lot of people, billions, spread across hundreds of worlds. We have thousands of different kinds of honor, and thousands of ways to be dishonorable." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending a shower of sparks into the air. "My people were explorers and conquerors and scientists and poets. We're builders and destroyers. We can be incredibly kind and unbelievably cruel. We're a paradox, a mess of contradictions." "You do not sound proud of them," Kira observed. "I am, and I'm not," he said with a sigh. "We reach for the stars, but we still have a darkness inside us. We want to understand the universe, but we can't even understand ourselves most of the time. We left our homeworld because we were too big for it, too hungry. We're always looking for the next frontier, the next thing to use." He looked at her, his gray eyes filled with a deep-seated weariness. "That's why I was out here, on the edge of nowhere, trying to find something new, something pure, something that hadn't been touched and spoiled yet." He had found it in Xylos, and his people in their blind expansion had almost killed him. There was an irony there that was not lost on Kira. The next leg of their journey took them into the bloodwood forest. The canopy was so thick that the light on the forest floor was a perpetual twilight, stained crimson by the blood-red sap that dripped from the trees. The air was heavy, humid, and smelled of iron and decay. Here, the predators were smaller, stealthier. Packs of chittering skulkers, 6-legged canine creatures with overlapping scales and razor-sharp teeth, roamed the shadows. They were ambushed at dusk. The attack was sudden and vicious. A dozen skulkers burst from the undergrowth, a wave of clicking jaws and snapping claws. There was no time to run, no time to think. Kira reacted with pure instinct, her claws flashing. She met the first skulker with a spin, raking its flank and sending it howling into a tree. But there were too many. They were a coordinated pack, flanking them, trying to separate them. "Back to back!" Marcus yelled, and she didn't hesitate. She pressed her back against his, the strange, soft texture of his clothing a solid anchor in the chaos. He held his long insect-mandible knife in one hand and a heavy, sharpened branch as a club in the other. They became a single, lethal entity. She was a whirlwind of claws and teeth, a fluid, deadly dance of predator-born grace. He was a bastion of calculated violence, his movements shorter, more brutal, using his club to break limbs and his knife for quick, fatal thrusts. She would wound a skulker, and he would finish it. He would block an attack aimed at her flank, giving her an opening to strike. A skulker leaped for her throat, Marcus smashed its head with his club in midair. Two more charged him from the side. Kira's twin tails whipped around, knocking one off balance while she eviscerated the other with a lightning-fast kick of her powerful hind legs, her claws tearing through its scaly hide. They moved in a deadly circle, the ground around them becoming slick with dark, viscous alien blood. The air was filled with snarls, clicks, and the wet sound of impact. In the heart of the frantic battle, a strange sense of calm settled over Kira. The rhythm Marcus had spoken of, she could feel it now. It was in the way he shifted his weight to telegraph his next move, the way his breathing matched the cadence of his strikes. She mirrored him, anticipated him, their two disparate fighting styles weaving together into a brutally effective harmony. Finally, the last of the skulkers, its nerve broken by the loss of its pack mates, fled into the crimson gloom. Silence descended, heavy and absolute. They stood back to back for a long moment, breathing heavily, splattered with blood and ichor. Slowly, they turned to face each other. Marcus had a deep scratch on his arm, and Kira's fur was matted with gore. He looked at her, his gray eyes blazing with a fierce light she had never seen before. "Not bad," he panted, a slow grin spreading across his face. "For a fur-covered predator." She felt an answering smile tug at her own lips, a foreign and exhilarating sensation. "You are not so clumsy for a soft-fleshed prey." In the red twilight of the bloodwood forest, surrounded by the evidence of their shared battle, something new sparked between them. It was more than respect, deeper than partnership. It was a current of shared intensity, a recognition of the fierce, unyielding spirit they both possessed. He reached out, not to tend a wound, but to gently brush a smear of blood from her cheek fur. His touch lingered for a second longer than necessary. And in that small moment, the vast, dangerous jungle around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, survivors bound by something far more powerful than a simple bargain. The trek out of the bloodwood forest was somber. The ferocity of their battle had left a mark, a silent acknowledgement of how close they had come to death. They moved with a newfound economy of motion, their senses attuned not just to the jungle but to each other. A twitch of Kira's ear was enough to make Marcus scan the canopy. A subtle shift in his posture would cause her to sniff the air for a new scent. They were a unit, functioning with an instinctual cohesion that transcended species. One afternoon, they emerged from the oppressive crimson gloom of the forest into a breathtaking sight. They stood on the edge of a vast, sunken valley, filled with colossal, crystalline structures that jutted from the ground like shattered teeth. As the twin sons of Xylos began their descent, their light fractured through the crystals, casting a million shimmering, multicolored rainbows across the valley floor. In the center of the valley grew a grove of immense, silvery-barked trees, their leaves glowing with a soft, internal bioluminescence. "The grove of ancestors," Kira breathed, her voice filled with a reverence Marcus had never heard from her before. "My people believe the spirits of our greatest hunters reside here, in the light of the Glimmerwood trees." "It's beautiful," Marcus said, his voice quiet with awe. The raw, brutal survivalism of the jungle had given way to a moment of sublime, unexpected beauty. They made camp at the edge of the grove, the air filled with the gentle, chiming sound of the wind moving through the crystal formations. The light from the Glimmerwood trees cast a soft, ethereal glow, bathing everything in a silver and blue luminescence. It was a place of peace, a sanctuary in the heart of the savage world. "This is the last stop before the mountain pass," Kira said, her gaze fixed on the glowing trees. "From here, it is only 3 more days of travel to my home." The reality of their journey's end settled over them, bringing with it a complex mix of relief and a strange, unwelcome melancholy. Their shared purpose, the simple, all-consuming goal of survival, was nearly complete. What would come next was uncertain and fraught with new dangers. "What will happen when we get there?" Marcus asked, voicing the question that had been shadowing them for days. "What will your people do?" Kira turned to him, her emerald eyes seeming to glow in the soft light. "I gave you my word, I will speak for you. I will tell the elders of our bargain of how you saved my life." She paused, her gaze dropping for a moment. "I will tell them of your skill, your honor. And will that be enough?" "My word carries weight," she said, though a flicker of doubt crossed her features. "I am Kira of the Bloodclaw clan, daughter of the chieftain. They will listen, but they are traditional. Wary of outsiders, they have never seen a human before, they will see you as a threat, an unknown. I am a threat, Marcus said, his voice flat. I killed a Graalmaw, I survived here for 2 years. Your people would be foolish not to see me as a threat. They will see your strength, Kira corrected him softly, but they will not understand its source. They will fear it. She looked at him, her expression a mixture of pride and sorrow. And they will not understand this. She gestured to the space between them, the bond that had grown in the crucible of the jungle. They will see a hunter who has brought a strange creature into our lands. It will be seen as a weakness, a contamination. Marcus reached out, his hand hovering in the air for a moment before he gently took hers. Her hand was larger than his, covered in soft fur, but her fingers were long and elegant, ending in the deadly, retracted claws. His thumb stroked the back of her hand, a simple, comforting gesture that sent a tremor through her. "Kira," he said, his voice low and serious. "Whatever happens, thank you. You've honored our deal." She looked down at their joined hands, at his pale, scarred skin against her dark fur. The physical contrast between them was so stark, yet the connection she felt was undeniable. All her life, she had been taught that strength was in predation, in dominance, in the solitary prowess of the hunter. But this human, this survivor, had shown her a different kind of strength, in partnership, in ingenuity, in quiet resilience. He had challenged everything she thought she knew about herself and the world. Her hunter's instincts, which had once screamed for his death, now screamed for his protection. The conflict within her was a raging torrent. Her duty was to her clan, to her people, to their way of life. But her heart, an organ she had long considered little more than a biological pump for the business of the hunt, now ached with a fierce, protective loyalty to this man. She slowly pulled her hand away, the loss of his touch leaving a sudden coldness. "We should rest," she said, her voice strained. "The final climb is strenuous." But neither of them slept much that night. They lay on their bedrolls, separated by the dying embers of the fire, each lost in their own thoughts. The beautiful, glowing grove seemed to mock them with its serenity, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within them. The journey had forged a bond between them that felt unbreakable, yet they were walking toward a destination that threatened to shatter it completely. The final 3 days were a blur of steep inclines and treacherous, windswept ridges as they ascended into the sleeping giant mountains. The lush jungle gave way to hardy alpine scrub and bare, unforgiving rock. The air grew thin and cold. They spoke little, the shared weight of their imminent arrival pressing down on them. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, they reached the summit of the final pass. Below them, nestled in the vast, circular caldera of a dormant volcano, was the Cathar settlement. It was a breathtaking sight. Buildings weren't constructed but grown, shaped from the living wood of massive, ancient trees, connected by gracefully arching bridges of woven vine and timber. Smoke curled from communal fire pits, and the distant figures of Cathar moved through the pathways with predatory grace. It was a place of wild, organic beauty, perfectly integrated with the formidable landscape. It was home. A deep, resonant horn blast echoed up the mountainside. They had been spotted. "A welcoming party," Kira said, her voice tight. Her twin tails, which had been still and tense, now began to twitch nervously. Marcus looked at the settlement, then at her. "This is it, then," he said. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Whatever you have to do, whatever you have to say to protect yourself and your position, you do it. Our bargain is fulfilled. You got me here. I don't expect you to fall on your spear for me." His words, meant to free her, only tightened the knot of conflict in her chest. He was offering her an escape, a way to save herself by sacrificing him. But she knew she couldn't take it. To betray the trust he had placed in her, to abandon the partner who had fought beside her and saved her life, would be a greater dishonor than anything her clan could accuse her of. They descended the final slope and walked onto the plateau at the entrance to the settlement. A group of 4 Cathar hunters blocked their path. They were large, powerful males, their black and gray fur marked with the clan symbols in ochre paint. They held long, obsidian-tipped spears, leveled not at Kira but directly at Marcus. One of them, a massive male with a scarred face and cold, yellow eyes, stepped forward. "Kira, you return. We had feared you lost to the jungle." His gaze flicked dismissively over her, then settled on Marcus with undisguised hostility. "What is this thing you have brought with you?" This soft skin? He is Marcus, Kira said, stepping slightly to place herself between the hunters and him. Her voice was steady, imbued with the authority of her bloodline. He is an off-worlder, a survivor. We made a bargain. Bargain? The scarred hunter scoffed. The sound was a harsh growl. We do not bargain with prey, we hunt it. The elders will want to see this creature, and they will want to know why you did not simply kill it and bring its pelt as a trophy. The weight of her choice pressed down on her. Her entire life, her identity, was tied to the laws and traditions of her people, represented by the 4 spears pointed at the man behind her. But the last month of her life, her very survival, was owed to him. She looked at the unyielding faces of her kin, at their xenophobic certainty and their rigid honor. Then she thought of Marcus's practical calm, his surprising knowledge, the feel of his hand on hers in the glowing grove. She turned her head slightly, her emerald eyes meeting his gray ones. She saw no fear in them, only a quiet trust in her. That trust was the final catalyst. Kira drew herself up to her full height, her posture radiating a defiance the hunters had never seen from her before. "He is not prey," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction across the mountain plateau. "He is my partner. He will be treated as my guest. Anyone who wishes to harm him will have to go through me." She unsheathed her claws, the sharp, curving blades gleaming in the cold mountain light. It was a challenge, a declaration of intent that broke every rule of Cathar hospitality and clan law. The hunters stared, their yellow eyes wide with shock. The scarred male's lips pulled back in a silent snarl. The bargain was fulfilled, but a new, more dangerous trial had just begun. Here, at the threshold of her home, Kira had made her choice. She had chosen not her duty, not her people, but the strange, resilient human who had saved her, and in doing so, had hunted her heart. The consequences of that choice were yet to be seen, hanging in the thin, cold air between 2 worlds.